Now, for more analysis, I spoke with Cliff Tan. He's former East Asian head for global markets research at MUFG Bank. And he began by speaking about how UK consumers are being impacted by rising food and energy prices.
For everyday Britons, it must feel really bad because of the inflation scare. But, you know, she has a pretty big challenge ahead of her. I think what they would like to imagine is that they can get the economy up to about a 2.5% growth rate from 1.7, which is where it is now. But that's going to be quite challenging, I think.
Let's expand on that just a bit. Getting that growth rate up from more than a percentage point, as you talked about, the 2.7. What details do we have right now about Truss's plan for taming inflation and kind of getting the country back on its legs from an economic standpoint?
Well, the bad news is that to get inflation under control, as we can also see in the U.S., you might need to slow the economy rather than boost it. And there are a lot of questions about how much independence she's actually going to give to the Bank of England. I mean, the Bank of England is not looking particularly hawkish, say, relative to the Fed. But, you know, if it's going to be held back further by political factors, that's going to be very challenging for getting inflation under control.
Let's also take a look back at Boris Johnson during his time as Prime Minister, and how you believe Truss's approach is going to differ from Boris Johnson. What kind of leader do you think he's going to be remembered for?
Well, I think he's going to be kind of remembered for being all over the place. I mean, you know, the problem with the conservatives is that, you know, when you look at their policy platform, it just looks like a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, kind of a smorgasbord of policy. I think, you know, what's really going to be challenging for PM Truss is about deregulation. You know, she's ideologically a conservative, but I think she's already flinched quite a few times when it comes to actually deregulating the economy. And I think for the small businessman in the UK, that's kind of what they're going to be looking for, to see if, you know, there's proof, there's substance in the promises in terms of deregulation.
You know, and you talked about it. She's with the Conservative Party, and you know, when we think back to perhaps the best-known conservative in the last 50 years, Margaret Thatcher, what's government doing to manage the cost of living crisis in that country now? What can we take from the past and perhaps implement into this version of the Conservative Party, if you will?
Well, I mean, Thatcher came to power in '79, which is the year that Paul Volcker really squeezed almost the life of the U.S. economy in order to get inflation under control. I mean, I think she walks like, and talks like Thatcher, but whether she's actually going to deliver the kind of, pain that might be necessary remains to be seen. I think there's too much of a committee approach. And even though she may personally believe in the Thatcher ideology, right, whether she's prepared to actually deliver like Thatcher remains to be seen.
You know, you talked about that committee approach, but didn't she need that to win this nomination? I mean, this is something that went on for quite some time, and depending on what week it was, there were different front runners.
No, I mean that's fair. We don't want to be too imaginary when it comes to politics. But the thing about Thatcher that she is remembered for is the willingness to sort of strike out in a direction that perhaps wasn't very popular even within her own party. And I think Truss, if she really wants to sort of inherit that mantle, needs to do something similar. And I'm not sure that we've seen signs of that yet. She's promised that she's going to deliver. We've got about, probably 5 to 10 days before we see what comes out of it. I wish her well, but so far the signs are not there that the Tories can deliver something that's really quite bold.